I was a Jewish guy from Westchester, New York. I fell asleep and crashed into a tree. I was out of my body, in the white light, looking down. My head was cracked open and my body had blood all over it. Behind me, there was this big circle of white. That's when I knew that being behind me was Jesus. There was no conflict inside of me about being Jewish. I felt a connection with Jesus. I went back into my body and came to 3 days later in the hospital. I did come back from my NDE with healing abilities.
The A.J. Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast.
We are here with Dr. Laurence Brock. He's an energy healer and a near-death experiencer. Hello, Laurence. How are you?
Hi, AJ. I'm good. Thanks for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
I understand that you developed your healing abilities shortly after your NDE in 1976. Can we talk about that, please?
These healing abilities happened to me. I did come back from my NDE with healing abilities, but I wasn't really aware of it. It wasn't a thought in my mind. Things just started to happen that they got activated, and then I kind of learned about it from it happening. So I was at a party and I was drinking and stuff, and I actually was kind of going to pretend that I was higher than I thought I was, and so I could go back the next day and see the girl who was having the party. And I had my friend drive me back. I was staying in my parents' house because I was visiting from out of town, and almost back to my parents, I realized my sister I took my mom's car, needed my mom's car for work the next morning. So I had my friend drive me back. I went into the party and told the girl that I was going to take my car because I told her I was going to leave it there. And I remember pushing through the crowd to get out the door. I don't remember actually walking out of the door. I remember a little bit walking down the path to my car. But then the next thing I remember, I was out of my body, in the white light, looking down at my body on the ground, and the car smashed. There was a police officer crouching over me. I was leaning against a tree with my back against a tree and my legs straight out on the ground. I fell asleep and crashed into a tree, into that tree that I was leaning against. I knew it right away, but I knew it from that perspective of being spiritual, where it didn't even bother me at all. It didn't disturb me at all that my head was cracked open and my body had blood all over it. But the feeling of where I was, I guess I could say, quite divine. And never quite figured out how to exactly describe it, but it was all white around me. I knew behind me there was this big circle of white, and within there was a full silhouette of what looked like a human-shaped body, but it was all white. So the being behind me at the time, I just accepted it as is without trying to label it in my mind because I really had no idea. Then there were all different shades of white and then other shades of white radiating off of that being. That time, I don't know how long I was there because it didn't seem, when I tell the story, it takes a minute. It seemed much longer than that, but it didn't seem like years or anything like some people say. So there was a feeling of, like, again, the words just never add up, but it was warmth and loving and something about knowing, but not needing to know. And it was more like being part of the universe, a part of God. And then after this experience of, even when I say it, my heart starts to warm up inside, and that could reflect it the best. The being behind me said, "You have to go back. Your father wants you to stay." I knew right in that moment that the father he was talking about was God and not my physical father. So I went back into my body and came to 3 days later in the hospital. When I first woke up, I don't know exactly when I first woke up, but I had some flashes of almost coming to consciousness of, it's almost like I still have the image in my mind. It's like these white, nurses or doctors walking by, sometimes doing things to me, doing things around me. My head was cracked open. If you look closely, you can see the scar. You can't see it back here, but it goes across and was all the way here. I asked my dad about it years later, and he said, yeah, he saw the skin on my head like that, and he could see into my head. That was definitely the worst part. But I had this bruise on my chest that was the shape of the steering wheel. I mean, a lot of my body was really banged up, so it was kind of sore. But I was 22 back then, and my body recovered very quickly. The thing that I remember very clearly is when I was about to be released from the hospital, and so I was sitting on my bed. I was already anxious and wanted to get going, but I had to wait for my parents to come pick me up. And I was sitting on the bed that was already made, and then my mother and father, the general practitioner doctor, and the neurologist came into the room, and I stood up. I was next to the bed. The neurologist was right here, then my mom, my dad, and the general practitioner. And the general practitioner was telling me, you have to take it easy for a while. I was a total jock. He said, you can't play any sports for a while. And then what I do remember is the neurologist left the circle, and he put his head very close to mine and said, you're lucky to be alive. And then the nurse who was there on the other side of the bed said, it was touch and go for a while. So that's really all they told me about the medical part, tell you the truth. And my body healed amazingly fast. I knew what happened, but I didn't know, never heard of a near-death experience. I didn't know. My only understanding of spiritual things were mostly from science fiction. I had read Autobiography of the Yogi and some Hermann Hesse books, but I didn't put two and two together in my head because that was not me, this suburban guy from, Westchester, New York, who, it was, okay, I had this experience, and then I, wanted to get back to, I was living in Colorado at the time. I wanted to get back there and get back to my job, basically. In the beginning, I shared it with a few people, and it wasn't received very well, so I stopped doing that. Things just started unfolding in my life in a spiritual way, and it was something in me. And again, was it God pushing me or something like that? It seems like it. But so I went back to Colorado. I had been working in a restaurant, so I worked there for a while. I didn't mention it to anyone at work. I mentioned it to one or two of my friends in Colorado. And then my mom kind of bribed me to come back to the Northeast and go into business with my dad. I think she was worried that I was out there, being a young and wild kid. And so I came back to the Northeast and went into my dad's electrical contracting business. So I noticed right away that my hands would become warm when I would touch people. Even if I would shake someone's hand, it would happen, or even retouching. And again, I didn't know quite what to make of it. One day I was taking a walk with a friend of mine in a wooded area I think it's in New Rochelle, New York, and the pathway goes near the water and into the woods a bit, and he twisted his ankle, and almost something inside of me, because it's not like I was thinking this way, just reached for his ankle, and it went from, he heard it, and I put my hands on there, I felt the heat, he felt the heat, and then it got better. And both of us were like, what? Didn't know what to make of it, and kind of let it go. And I did let it go, which almost seems ridiculous at this point to just let that go. But, and he said something like, my ankle really hurt. And then all of a sudden it was better. And he tested it and it was fine. And we continued walking. Another thing that happened a little while after that was my next door neighbor. This was my next door neighbor growing up. His father, I was friends with him. And so I knew their whole family, like our families were close. And one day the father told me that his father, who I also knew, so my friend's grandfather, was about to pass away. And I said something to him. I said, I'll pray for him. And I remember the feeling, I don't even know why I said it, because I didn't even believe in praying. It was like something in me said it sarcastically and something in me was being genuine. But I did pray for him. and I felt something happen. I didn't know what I felt, but I felt like an energy shift. It almost feels like the pressure of the air becomes thick on me. And I felt that. Again, I didn't know what to make of it, but a couple of days later, when I saw the father of the next door neighbor, he said to me, I think something happened when you prayed because my father got so much better. So he was talking about the grandfather, and it ended up he was about to pass away any moment, and he lived about 6 months longer. Again, I didn't quite put it together quite then, and other things happened. I kind of got a wind of what was going on, and I started taking classes in some healing and learning stuff about it, but I never thought of myself as a healer, really. I don't even know what drew me to do it. When I think about it, it's not like my mind was thinking, I have these abilities, I should learn how to do it. One day after work, I was sitting in my apartment and someone knocked on the door. And, I often add in, nowadays, I always know who's going to come to my door because of cell phones. But back then it wasn't like that. So I answered the door. There was this beautiful woman at the door, and she came in, and right away she said, the sister of a friend of yours from Colorado, and she told me some interesting things about it. Her sister was one of the people who, and I knew right away who she was because a lot of her features were the same, and she was one of the people I told about my experience. And then the woman at the door, within the next sentence, said, I know someone who teaches about what happens after we die, and I want to introduce you to him. When that woman came to see me and said, I know someone who teaches what happens after we die, I don't even know how she came up with that, but she did. And so obviously other people, my thought about it was this thing happened. I had no idea. I couldn't label it as dying or I didn't even try. I didn't even have enough information to start forming ideas about it. I didn't have enough information to think of asking questions about it. Again, something in me just started on this path, and, sometimes in spite of myself, but it just has been moving me all this time. So it's like this woman showed up and really basically said, here, walk this way. And I didn't have to do anything. She just showed up at my door. I got introduced to this Sufi sheikh, and he's an Islamic teacher. The Mevlevi dervishes, or the Mevlevi Sufis, follow the teachings of Jalaluddin Rumi. A lot of people know as the poet Rumi. He wrote volumes and volumes of spiritual books. His kind of Bible of his religion is called the Matnawi, and that's something that I studied for years. When I went to the Sufi sheikh, I remember being confused, like, why is he teaching class about what happens after we die? And I still didn't even get it. I was a Jewish guy from Westchester, New York, but I felt very drawn to study and learn from him. And he would teach classes about what happens after you die. And one of the classes, he started to talk about Mary. And as soon as he said Mary's name, something in me lit up, and then he started to say how open Mary was to God and to the Christ light, that she could manifest Jesus. And I knew that experience of being open like that is what I experienced in my near-death experience. As soon as he said Jesus, it's like, again, something in me just lit up, and that's when I knew that being behind me was Jesus. When he started to talk about Mary and Jesus, that's when I got, that's what I experienced. So, I use the term near-death experience, but because that's how people describe it, but it is just being connected to this love that is just so amazing. And when I think of it and connect into it as I'm doing now, I don't even have the need to label what it is. It's just like, this is just the greatest thing in the world, And there was no conflict inside of me about being Jewish or Catholic or Islamic or whatever it was, because it was just truth. And that's how I felt about that ever since. I did tell some friends, and someone who was my best friend for years and years shortly after that decided to have nothing to do with me. He actually even had his father come talk to me about something, and his father said something. There are people that are, Jews for Jesus. I don't remember exactly, but they did not like that I saw it. felt a connection with Jesus, and I still do. So I was still doing electrical construction, and I got into a minor car accident where this woman went through a red light, and I just swerved out of the way so she didn't hit me, and my van went off the road up onto a big rock. And nothing happened to my body. I was fine. And the police came. They were there so quickly. I was surprised. And the woman took full, responsibility for the accident. And the cops pushed my van off the rock, and I was able to go about my way. When I woke up the next morning, my shoulders and lower back were really tight. And it wasn't like I hit something. It was just, and I knew part of it was I had been working way too much in electrical contracting, and I decided to take an actual vacation. But I took a vacation and visited some students of the Sheikhs up in Vermont. Part of my mind was thinking, this will be a relaxing vacation, but I guess purely relaxing vacations kind of ended once I really started my spiritual journey, partially because the spiritual journey just is always going on. But when I was in Vermont, the guy there suggested I try a polarity therapy treatment, which I had never heard of. I tried it and had a phenomenal experience. It was, the woman said it would be about an hour long, and I almost got off the table and started to complain to her how short it was. When I looked at the clock, though, I had been on the table for 3 hours. And it was like all these memories flashed through my mind, all these emotions. It was cathartic, and it was just interesting. I was going to complain that it wasn't an hour, and it was really 3 hours. And I had one more session with her. And then, of course, she happened to know someone near where I lived in New York. And so I started getting sessions from her. And one day that woman said she's going to start a class, and she thought I would like it. And I did. As soon as I started using my hands directly, it went from almost what felt like theoretical healing training with the Sheikh to something I could do. My body, I'm very kinesthetic, and that's when I start to feel it. So I did that kind of as a hobby for a while, and one day I just realized I'm sick of arguing with men about money in the electrical contracting business. And so I started to shift into my healing practice, and luckily I had learned some manifesting techniques that I kind of put together, and I was able to start my practice and start making a living almost instantly. So I was talking to this woman at a party, and I was talking to her about it, and she said, I'm interested. And so I gave her my phone number, and this was on the phone. And as soon as she started telling, she had pain in her body, arthritis. And as soon as she was on the phone and started talking, I saw this image of this Native American there with her. And I listened to her for a while. I said, excuse me, you have this Native American healing guide. Again, I didn't even believe in healing guides. So it's like, I don't even know, again, my mind is the way it is. And she said, I know, someone else told me about that. So she had been to someone who could see somewhat in the spirit. And I said to her, you don't understand, this guide is there to help you. And this is something I knew to be true inside of me. And as soon as I told her that, I could just, again, felt the thing. It's like it opens up, and then this pressure comes in. And she said, whoa, the pain is gone. And so she let this guide in to help her, and her pain was gone. I checked back with her like 3 months later, and her pain was gone. A lot of times the people I'm working with, being successful is a little less concrete than physical healing. But there were still, from all along, there were these miraculous physical healings. What I did in the beginning was I just started calling. It was before there was email and everything. So I was just calling every phone number that I had. And I had some lists of phone numbers from groups I was in, all sorts of things. And I didn't even remember who the people were. And I would call up. And one in particular, there was this woman who I called, and I didn't even remember who she was when I called her. As soon as I saw her, I knew who she was. And she was a manicurist in Manhattan, and she worked for Vogue magazine and, photo shoots for a lot of fashion magazines. And she loved my work. And she started sending a lot of her clients to me. A lot of them were female models, were these gorgeous women that were really nice. There were men too, but a lot back in those days, my practice was mostly women. And back in those days, mostly women were doing spiritual work. And I'm happy to say nowadays, my practice is like half and half. And I'm glad that men have stepped up and liberated themselves and do spiritual work. So I still just kept meeting people. And let's see. So one of the people that came to see me was this woman. So I started a practice. I had a practice in Manhattan, and I had a practice in Westchester, New York, near Shell, New York, where I live. And so in Manhattan, my practice was full, a lot of it with the models that woman was sending to me. In New Shell, it wasn't quite clicking right away and wasn't quite happening. And I was thinking about, what I could do to manifest more clients there. And one of my clients in Manhattan, who was not a model, she happened to be a publicist, a pretty well-known publicist. She came in one day. I knew something was up because she would always wear a black suit, usually with pants, for work. And she came in a khaki jacket and khaki pants. And she said to me right away, and part of it is, she had come to me for like close to a year. And most of the time I was making suggestions about her changing her diet, exercising, and meditations. And those are the main things I encourage people to do. And I realized one day that she was charming me out of talking about these things. And the next time I saw her, I said to her, "You're charming me out of talking about lifestyle change." And she said, "Yeah, I'm not going to do anything you tell me to do. I'm here for you to fix me." So a couple of months later, she came in the khaki outfit, and she said, "I'm going to take a sabbatical from work. Now I'm going to do everything you said." And she did. She started swimming every day. She changed her diet. She started meditating, and she lost weight, and she got much healthier. Part of that was, she said, "I'm only going to collect half of my salary," which I thought was pretty generous of her job, to pay her when she wasn't going to be there. But she said, "Instead of paying you with money, I'll pay you in services." This was great for me because I would never even thought of hiring a publicist, but she was definitely out of my price range also. So she started working with me and wrote articles about my work. And one of them was comparing how the work I did as an electrician, repairing energy in a house, to what I did now to repairing the energy in a body. And she thought it would attract, possibly clients that were outside of, my normal clientele. For some years, once a year, I would go up to the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut and teach classes on mindfulness, on my breathing exercise I developed, in meditation. And the woman who arranged it for me, after, I think it was a mindfulness class, and I called my class Mindfulness Plus or something like that. But it's cool, they have classes like that at that school. And afterwards, she said, "Oh, I'm going to be teaching a class about," I always remember death and dying, but I think it was called Life and Dying, or it was about how different traditions view death. And I said to her, just in a very casual way, "Oh, I had a near-death experience." And she was like, "Oh, you got to come teach my class." And then I posted that on Facebook, just an upgrade. It was more to keep in touch with family and stuff, and I put something about, I'm going to talk about my near-death experience. And within moments, I remember there were 50 people within a minute saying, "Oh, I want to hear about it," And that's when I knew it was a thing, and I could talk about my spiritual experiences to people who would like to hear about it. So it went from something I didn't really talk about to something I could totally talk about. I looked on Facebook and saw there were thousands of people interested in. So it went from, I'm going to keep it to myself, to I can just tell the world. It's really quite amazing. I mean, you can talk to teenagers, you could talk to kids, grown-ups. Everyone knows about it now. It's not like this thing that people think I'm crazy, which is good. So it's everywhere. It's in movies. It's in even so many times I watch TV shows that seem to have nothing to do with that, and someone will casually mention a near-death experience. It's like, really? Like, it's such a part of the culture in the United States. Anyway, I spent about 10 years studying with the Sufi Sheikh, a few of them very involved physically being around him. I traveled to Vancouver, to Boulder, to Texas, and some in New York City to spend time with him. And he taught me a lot. He taught me a lot about spiritual healing, and just, so much. He really, so he started to call me a sensitive right away, which I knew was a good thing because he had written a book and I read it right away. And his teacher called him a sensitive, and a sensitive is definitely what I am. And I'm very sensitive to energy and all that helps in my healing work. And it was good to find out, because being a sensitive man in the construction business does not work out so well. And so I was able to find a way to direct my sensitivity. One of my very first experience with the Sheikh was I don't remember if I called him or he called me. So the woman who introduced me set this call up, and I talked to him on the phone for a little while, and he basically said a couple of things. One is he started calling me a sensitive. The other one, he would call me a good man. And then the other one, he even said, he's not my real teacher, but I can hang around him till I find, or he would say, we find your real teacher. And I didn't know what he was talking about at all. But then I talked to him. It just seemed like small talk. And then he sent me a remedy in the mail. So the next day when I got home from work, there was this package at the door with this dropper bottle in what looked just like water, with instructions of how to take this remedy. I took the first dose. Nothing happened. I was expecting this. And even back then I was somewhat thinking, is this guy just messing with me, or joking around? When I took the second remedy, within moments, I felt my body getting hot. I happened to be at my mom's then, and she must have seen it because she said, you look flush. And she, like when I was a kid, she put her hand on my head to feel if I was warm, and then took my temperature, and it was 104, which is dangerously high. In one way I was a little worried. In one way I knew it was part of the process, and I was kind of excited because I had read something in his book about burning off the dross, that he called it. So the stuff that's not spiritual, that level of fever lasted, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes or half an hour. And then I started to feel my fever go down. And I knew something had happened. Again, a lot of it is having these experiences and not knowing what was going on in my mind at all. I did spend, after that, like 10 years with him. Like I said, so I spent time trying to think of some of the mystical, magical things. He was he would joke around all the time. He loved to, have a drink and start listening to music and having fun. But everything would have a spiritual undertone to it, where it was always a lesson. He talked a lot about relationship between man and woman, and how to honor each other, and how to be a spiritual person or a spiritual man in a relationship of honoring and recognizing the spirituality in each other. He performed, besides that healing on me that he performed many healings over the years that I'm not thinking of any specifically, but he would talk about what happened after we die. So there was a course he taught. I think it was in Boulder, and we used the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So we would read that. There was also, we used this book by E.J. Gold, who I never met personally, but his books were always, put a big smile on my face. And he seemed like even more of a character than my teacher. Something happened where someone called me one day and saying, me and my 4 friends want to come see you, and our teacher has approved you already. So right away, I got 5 new clients, and they introduced me to another teacher who was Hindi teacher. Her name was Lotus. And so my practice got pretty much filled up with those 5 people, and I started on my next journey of my next teacher. It was interesting because I went to see her, and we talked. Again, it seemed like small talk to me, and pretty much the same way the sheikh said in the very beginning, I have all I need after the first call. She said a similar thing, and she said she would let me know what I was going to study with her. She seemed to know I was going to study with her when I hadn't decided, but she basically told me I was going to study the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, and doing tarot readings. And so I studied with her, and it wasn't really for that long, because after a few months, one day I went to see her and she said, this is the last time you're going to see me. I'm going back to India to do this extended retreat or whatever. And, I'm not going to be able to teach you anymore, which seemed to come out of nowhere. But I learned a lot about symbols. I did learn how to do tarot readings. I don't do it, and it wasn't really quite my thing, but the symbolism is something that a lot of times I get images of symbols, and that has what I learned with her helped me be able to read those symbols that I see.
If someone is afraid of dying, or recently a loved one passed away, what would you tell them?
Well, usually, I tell them I explain my experience. I mean, I remember when my dad passed away, like maybe 6 months before he passed away, he was struggling, and his voice went almost right away, and he was such a social person. It was so frustrating for him. And then it got to the point where he couldn't even walk. But when he passed away, he was so happy in the spirit. It was like he was flying back and forth like this, like a little kid. And he was so free. A lot of times I can help people connect to their past loved ones, and they really like that a lot. There was one time I remember, I think this woman's son reached down and touched her on her heart like this, and she felt it. And so it really made a big difference for her.
You recently wrote a book about your life journey. It's called Autobiography of a Healer. Can you talk about it?
Yes, it was great to publish that book, and I'll thank you, AJ, for your support in doing that, because you and your team really helped me quite a lot just get past my blocks about it. I started writing some about my story years ago, little bits here and there, and then I'd say maybe a year ago I decided to get serious about it. But it was great to go back and really remember the details. As I was writing, it was like certain details about my story that I hadn't really thought about in a long time came back, and it was there was a cathartic part of it. There was a joyful part of it. One of the stories is I went to the ashram in upstate New York, City Yoga, and had an interaction with Guru Mai, and I forgot about it, because one of the things, I was sitting in the crowd and I looked up to the left, and along the wall there were these giant spiritual beings, and most of them were Hindi, and then there were 2 people in a suit and tie that were obviously not Hindi. But again, I had these experiences and just took them like, oh yeah, it's normal. But it was just nice to go back and remember those things, the things with Lotus, the details of that. Just how miraculously somehow I got from there to here, after my near-death experience.
You offer healing services. How can people contact you, and what do you offer?
It combines counseling and energetic healing, and people can make appointments on my website, laurencebrock.com, or text me or send me a message on WhatsApp at 732-567-6388. That's in the United States. And the tone of the sessions sometimes vary from person to person, but basically I do hold my hands up like this, and it's like I feel this energy. So I just tune into that during the session. I can feel the energy in my hand, and almost always people on the other end feel it. They feel, and anywhere in the world. I mean, sometimes the biggest kick I get is when people are in Australia or someplace like that, that the time difference makes it a different day. And in my sci-fi loving mind, it's like time travel, which it isn't, but it is the energy. When I'm working with them, it's like they're right here, and I see an image of them, and they hold the energy around them, and they feel it in their body. I mean, I had someone just before this, and they have a lot going on in their life, and so their energy is really drained. And by the end of the session, they were smiling, their eyes were bright, and they just feel so much better. I encourage everyone to meditate and journal write and do your spiritual work and take care of yourself and know that there is something really awesome and amazing in you. Like, I have this ability to help people heal, but everyone has something in them, and to really go for finding that and expressing that and trusting that you're good and trusting that God's wisdom and knowledge is inside of you. I'm Dr. Laurence Brock, and I want to recommend AJ and his team at Grapevine Books. He helped me publish 2 books. My latest one is Autobiography, The Healer, Near-Death Experience to the Power of Love. And it's about my near-death experience. AJ was both very professional, very supportive personally, and those 2 things are really important to me. He was a great support to me as a friend and as a coworker. If you have a book in you, let him help you get it out. That's what it did for me. I've been working on this book for quite a while, and his support really was good. I can't say enough about it. If you have a book that you want to publish, work with him, you'll get it done.
If you're interested in publishing your book in Amazon, contact me, and my publishing team and I will lend you a friendly hand. Send your email to ajparbooks@gmail.com. That's ajparbooks@gmail.com. Stairway to Heaven, 25 near-death experiences about our encounters with God, Jesus, and paradise. Journalistic research on real cases by A.J. Parr.
I looked down, there's no body, there's no me, but I felt just like me. And my first thoughts was, wow, this must be heaven. The whole Bible, Jesus, God thing, it's really true. And I said, if you're praying and you talk to God, it's just like that. It's God, you need to send people back so they can tell people it's real. Send some back. They have no idea this is real.
So there was quite a bunch of activity that they were doing during this time. And so, I know they were working on me really hard, but the whole time that I was gone, I went to heaven. So as far as what I was experiencing, it was wonderful, and I was able to see God and to see Jesus.
I turned and I said to this one leader character who had come and collected me, I said, who are you? Who are you exactly? You're not the same as these, because he was not the same as the other angels. And he seemed to be the one that was emanating this incredible love more than anyone else. And he just looked at me and said, I am the one you call Lord. Now, for me, there's only one person in all of history that I call Lord, and that's Jesus. And this was Jesus that I was sitting in front of. And that really did overwhelm me at that point.
I remember feeling all this light, seeing light all around me. And I was just like, when you're in a deep state of meditation, when you go so deep that you don't see what's around you, you just become one with the light. So that's what happened to me. I became one with the light.
At that point, I was turned upward, my spirit was, and I was aiming towards the sky. And I saw a beautiful, bright white, but it isn't a white that we can describe. So it's the brightest light you could imagine here on earth, but without being blinding.
I cannot die right now. You take me back. I have a lot to do right now. I said, no, you make a promise to me and you need to fulfill your promise. So welcome to heaven. From today, you're part of me and part of all of them. From today, you start walking with me and walking with all of them. Love is the most powerful force in the universe, and that's what I'm going to unite the whole humanity again. And then he said, okay, he put his hands around me and said, let's do a live review.
I just really became fascinated with the light and became just the joy and the love of God and just the peace of God just began to wash over me. And I just began to look at my arms, and, you know, it's not a light like you just turn on. I mean, this light had like particles. It was just like moving and just covering my arms and my body.
When I was enveloped with that bliss and joy, at first it was all just a bright, warm light. And then it started to like settle down and take form. And it felt like I was in a cathedral, maybe with the marble walls and high ceiling or something, but it was still kind of misty looking. And I know that I had looked over to the right and I saw a good size, like an architect's table with a great big, huge book, like a huge Bible or something, open about halfway. And I remember somebody telling me what was in that book. And I believe it was my life. And I was only halfway through.
Stairway to Heaven, 25 near-death experiences about encounters with God, Jesus, in paradise. Journalistic research on real cases by A.J. Parr.
This has been the A.J. Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe.